it's different than a lot of other instruments in what you can do with it, how you experience it. For me, it was so different than playing the drums. The drums were loud. Everything you did was so completely public. So for 3 years, I tried to be a drummer, but with the guitar, of course, it was quiet. And you could, bash it, and it was still quiet. It wasn't until you turned it up, But you could still get that same intensity with it. And drums were really not like that. They're totally dynamic and acoustic. So the important part about that was because that allowed me to feel comfortable to quietly play this song, for instance. Was that it, I think? Some song that I was would be normally embarrassed to write, was my first song. I think it was called Lady in Pink because it was a drawing of a woman in pink that my sisters had done and taped to a closet door or something like that. I don't know. I was just down there between the bed and the closet playing my sister's guitar and started to write a song about that little painting. And but yeah, these chords I wouldn't be caught dead playing really loud, certainly not with my friends, but because the guitar was so intimate, I could kind of do it privately. And I think for me, having the time to spend exploring what was so intimate about these chords was important, and then figuring out how many different ways I could use them. It took years to figure out that this chord, this E minor with an added second or added ninth, could, eventually maybe, it could be part of an arpeggio if it was an extended, but it all came from me understanding the mood of it. It was a little bit more than just E minor. Now, I didn't know that back then, that this was a ninth or a second. All I just figured was that my little finger's not doing anything. What happens when I start putting it on these other strings? So there's a certain design and geometry to the guitar that allows for these little sort of explorations to happen, like with a chord. The fingers are just like, what am I going to do with this guy? He's just hanging out. Might as well flutter him around, And that was the beginning, I think, of me just feeling very comfortable, even playing in the first position here, that each one of these chords, whether it was a G or a D, that I could do something with it simply by lifting a finger off and then investigating what it was. And I think that was an important part. It was part of my nature to remember to write down these things. So I wrote down a little pictogram of this and said, find out what that is. And I scoured chord books at, guitar stores to try to find that particular fingering. And then I finally figured out, okay, they're calling that a D triangle 9, D major 9, and it sounded very important. But I know that it just happened because I stuck my fingers there, It's funny, back when I was, that young, it took 2 fingers to play that chord. Now I can play it with 1 finger. What does that mean? I'm just spreading as I get older. My fingertips they do get smarter, the fingertips. You hope that they do, but I think back then I didn't know any shortcuts, so everything was painfully explored and probably executed in the most difficult way till I gained experience, and then, of course, singing, again, the whole thing about it being quiet and private was important because I could sing over it, and then I could start to find those notes I was singing, and that was really my first attempt at understanding that there was a scale, a melody, set of notes that would sort of go with a set of chords. And I don't know why I started to think of it so early, but I thought, well, if each of the notes has got an alphabetical letter, you could arrange them alphabetically, and then eventually that would be your scale. It took quite a long time before I knew how to categorize scales or judge the intervals. I wasn't even thinking that. I was just thinking about the alphabet, and I related everything to the piano in my family living room.
Right.
And so if I had a question, I'd go back down there and I'd just sort of look at it at the piano and say, okay, it is linear. It does work in that fashion. But, you know, the first couple of months, it was just this, and everything from here to here was mysterious. It was like a fog would rolled over the whole thing. And I just try to get rid of that and slowly move it up, you know, and start to go, okay, I get it. I didn't have that fret back then. Those first steps are important, and if they turn you off, well, then you never bother with the second step. But the guitar always felt much more friendly than the drums, besides the fact that the drums were loud. They were more complicated. This was a two-limb exercise, the guitar. The legs and the feet could pretty much stay still, so I didn't have to be so coordinated. Right. That really didn't come until performance entered into it, and then I realized, oh, you do really have to get the whole body going into it. But I think that these little chords in the beginning were fascinating to me, and chords that you could move around. Like you're taking your E chord and moving it up a fret. It really fascinated me that, not that you could move them around, that was pretty obvious, but the fact that when I did this chord, that it felt so different. Right. I didn't know that it, was applying an F Lydian mode over an E bass, or that it made the E position either Phrygian or Phrygian dominant. I had no idea. Right. It just felt exotic. When I started with the bar chords, it was the same kind of thing. You press down, and when it got really painful, I'd lift off, and I thought, well, there's those strings there. What are they doing, when I move up? I love this whole idea